All right, there we go. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see everyone after a long summer. This is our first meeting after the summer, and we're happy to be here with you and our guest, Phil Gardiner. So before we get started with Phil's presentation, just a few notes from us, from the board. Slide, Dave. Thank you. So here's how to reach us. You can always reach us at our website, agilehartford.org, to see what's coming up. We have a Gmail account, which we monitor if you want to send us any questions. We're also on all the social media channels, and thanks, Vin Sukraj, for maintaining those. And we have our past presentations available on YouTube, and with Phil's consent, we'll have tonight's presentation out there as well, if you want to refer to anything. So feel free to reach out to us on any of those channels. Next slide. So here is our board, and we've been working all summer to kind of get our fall and winter slate together. So just want to say, for me personally, how much I appreciate this group and all the great work that they've done and the work that they continue to do. This is a great board, very involved with the community, very happy to serve. So after tonight's presentation from Phil, you'll get a little survey on how did the presentation go, what did you like about tonight's presentation, what can we do as a community, what would you like to see, what would you like us to talk about, what are speakers and topics you'd like to learn more about. So please take a minute or two and respond to that, and we will check out all your feedback. So tonight's sponsor, and I really want to express my appreciation for Reliance Group, who has stuck with us through the past couple of years of all this uncertainty and ambiguity, but they are still here, and we are very, very pleased that they are. So let me turn you over to Diane Hiller for a moment.
Thanks, Steve. So I'm not sure like who's on tonight that may or may not know us. So I'll just go over a quick thing that, Eliza Group, we've been industry leader in talent solutions for more than 30 years. And one of our areas of expertise is in Agile. So we have Agile advisory services that help organizations understand their Agile readiness. And we design and guide Agile transformation, and we help measure the progress towards Agile maturity. So we offer this through like Agile team solutions that are scalable and designed to help address your capacity limitations and fully qualified cross-functional team members. So if we can be of service to you, if you're looking for any new Agile roles, or if you think that, Eliza could help in any way your organization with some of the service offerings that we have, definitely please feel free to reach out. We would happily, take a conversation and see how we might be able to help. So obviously we're very grateful for another Agile Hartford lining up another outstanding virtual speaker with Phil Gardiner joining us. So thanks, Phil, for doing that. And I'm looking forward to the presentation.
Thanks, Diane. So full disclosure, Phil and I are alumni of Eliza Group, as Diane probably knows. So really enjoy my time with Eliza and absolutely recommend them. So what's coming up for Agile Hartford? So in 2 weeks, we have a lunch and learn with Jesse Fuel on Agile leadership practices, becoming a more effective Agile champion. Next month, October's meeting, we have Tricia Broderick, Energized Without Using Power Over, which I believe is a presentation she gave at the last Agile Alliance meeting this summer. Is that right? November, we have Paula Espinosa, Coaching Lenses for Solving Complex Problems. I believe, so let me back up a second. For Tricia's presentation on October 12th, registration is right now live as of 10 minutes ago. So you can go out to Eventbrite and sign up for that. Jesse's Lunch and Learn in 2 weeks is also live right now. There's about 30, 35 individuals signed up so far. So let's get a good showing for Jesse as well. And then to round out the year, we welcome back longtime Agile Hartford favorite, Richard Kasparowski, for an in-person event at City Steam. We have the date locked and loaded. We just need to make sure Richard's schedule is going to permit that to happen, but he's already in the loop. So at the end of the day, we're going to have our annual in-person celebration year-end. City Steam, Jungle Crush, it'll be great. So this evening's presenter. So help me welcome Bill Gardiner for SAFE the second time around. And Bill and I were talking. He and I were actually in the same SAFE SPC class in Austin in 2014.
Early 2014. Yeah, first week of March 2014.
And that was, I think 3.0 had just come out.
Yep, brand new.
Yeah, it was a little less complicated then.
Yeah, in some ways.
So
I look at it totally differently these days than I did back then, but yeah. So
Phil, why don't you take it away?
So I'm Phil Gardiner, and that's what I caught up with Steve here. You know, back in 2014, I became an SPC, and I was awesome. You know, it's 2022, and I'm pretty good. So lots of humbling along the way. You know, and really honored to be here to be able to share some insights from the field. I've kind of got two major passion areas. Both of those lead to sustainable ways of working and more profitability, or more service to the country if you're in the government sector. And what powers those are lean portfolio management, giving executives something to do to become lean and agile, and the change agents that actually guide so that they don't need consultants to come in and do stuff. And so a lot of this work comes from working with lots and lots of companies, from small, medium-sized companies to Fortune 4, and really just sharing with you some insights there. Along the way, I would like to can I share I guess my little piece. I don't really want to say much more about myself. You got my LinkedIn if you want to look up, well, where's Phil been, blah blah blah, right? Essentially, I've been involved in Lean Agile at scale for many years. I started with an amazing transformation I was part of. We had 30 coaches from this company back then, and stood up dozens and dozens of Scrum teams, and everybody got excited, and PowerPoints were flying about how successful we were. The coaches left. Within 6 months, the entire business unit was blown apart because it failed miserably and utterly. And the reason it failed wasn't because of we had great Scrum teams, but there was more to success at that big enterprise than just great Scrum at the team level. And so that kind of kicked off my personal journey to bring into scaling. And I found that if I can get those 7 people to work differently, it impacts those 10,000 people, as opposed to getting, and so a lot more over the years, I've spent more and more time outside of IT, getting into the business. And now last few years, more and more time working with more senior executives and some of the strategy side of things. Along the way, I still mentor people. I serve as a phone a friend for people. When I say that, that's not a paid thing. That's a community thing, because I wouldn't be here if I didn't have those phone a friends helping me out back in the day. And quite frankly, sometimes, occasionally, Mark there in Australia, occasionally still today, a couple times a year. Hey, Mark, can we talk about this gnarly situation? All right. So I've got a Miro board that I'll use as well. It's more for input than anything else, just to kind of get your thoughts outside of chat as we go here, since we're not face to face. But let me just pull up the little deckware thing here. All right. So I can see chat. So if you do have a question, you can always ask that in chat. And I can see it there and respond to it in line as I'm going. So SAFE the second time around, second chance SAFE. Really, there's a lot of companies out there that have implemented SAFE, and the person selling it promises the moon, 50% faster time to market, 50% happier employees, all those things. Well, the process, if you look at SAFE as a process, doesn't get you there. SAFE by itself is a framework. And so we're going to talk a little bit about just level setting here, kind of framing up what the framework is and what it isn't. It's one of those things. These last couple of years, I don't get involved in those conversations on LinkedIn about, the love SAFE, hate SAFE, right? I found that it's a tool, it's a framework. Can you misuse it? Yes. Can you use it to great effect? Yes. So what the difference is the people. So we'll talk a little about framing the framework. I'll walk through some of the common pitfalls that I've seen that lead to not good outcomes when people try to implement SAFe. And then we'll talk about some of the ways that you can recover from that, some of the second chances. A lot of the time I've spent I think the last Agile release train I launched, where they were just trying to start this for the first time, was back in 2019. So it's been a little while. Most of the stuff we do now is I work for a small consultancy. We clean up some big messes. We do some LPM and things like that. So I'll talk a little about some of those second chances. So along the way, a couple of things. I have no problem being interrupted. So if you do have a question, feel free to throw it in chat or raise your hand or just speak up. My plan is to get through the pitfalls pretty quickly, and then get your input as we go. So let me share that link to the Miro. First one, this link here, it should be open to everybody. Basically, that takes you here. And the idea here is just kind of as we're going through this, if there's things that resonate with you, when we think about, your own SAFe journey, your own experience with Scaled Agile Framework, what are some of the pluses that you've seen? What are some of the minuses that you've seen? What are some of the things that you might do differently next time? And so I want to use this as more of a backdrop than anything else, where when I go through these pitfalls and I want to see, as I'm talking, if you have a thought pop into your mind, I just ask that you throw it up on the Miro board. And then when we look at the actual pitfalls, and there's 5 I'm going to go through: SAFe's the destination, right? Practices over principles, Agile in name only, the magic of SPC certification, and the SAFe says trap. And so for each of these, there's a space to kind of share your thoughts. If you've got, hey, here's some solutions I've used myself, or, when I think about some of the problems that lead to that, what are some of the root causes? Well, maybe it stems from the way people operate. Maybe it stems from the processes we have. So just, use this little template from a Inspect and Adapt event to share your thoughts. That way, when it comes time to talk about what we do about it, I've got a place here that can kind of power some of our additional discussions. My goal is to have at least a third of the time just kind of open Q&A. And this is a tool that we can use to kind of create some thoughts and gather more information, because not everybody wants to speak up and on the Zoom, especially when it's being recorded. So it's a place for you to kind of silently ask your questions and share your feedback and your thoughts. So that's our Miro. All right. So framing the framework. What is SAFe? Anybody have any thoughts on what SAFe is? You don't need to pull any punches too. If we've got some not so loving SAFe people in here, that's okay too. I read a memo once from the government, from the self-titled czar of software from the Department of Defense. He sent out a memorandum of record that said, avoid rigid and prescriptive frameworks like SAFe. And when I showed that memo, I remember I was actually working with Army Futures and the Air Force at the time, helping them launch an Agile release train. I showed that to the GS-15, the government executive, and he laughed out loud. I mean, he just kept laughing because his experience was 100% different than that. He was 180 degrees different. My point on this is that SAFe is what you make of it, right? So SAFe, the Scaled Agile Framework, is really kind of, you get to determine if it's rigid or if it's prescriptive, because naturally it's a framework. So what is SAFe? SAFe's a framework, right? And by nature, what is a framework? A basic structure of something, a set of ideas or facts that provide support for something. That's all that it is, a framework. People seem to forget that. Instead, they say, what is SAFe? That's SAFe. Wow, we don't need that. All we need is Scrum. All we need is Kanban. This is an Agile. Look at all that stuff on there. Well, this is a knowledge base. What you're looking at here is a front page 98 style clickable image map, right? This is basically a graphical interface to a knowledge base. I oftentimes just use the search now myself, but this kind of gives you a focus on all the different things here. This is not about how do we get better Agile teams. This is not how do we deliver software better. The framework has now evolved to something different. This is basically, here's this massive tool set that allows you to solve and have some sort of lean Agile systems thinking, lean startup, whatever it might be, approach to dealing with all these different variety of challenges that come up in the modern business. One of the examples, I work for a CST. The CEO of our company is a certified Scrum trainer. And yes, I signed up to start a safe practice inside a Scrum Alliance training and consulting company. I'm kind of crazy that way. What I've learned over the years, though, last couple of years working there, is that he and I agree on most things. He's a certified Scrum trainer. I'm an SPCT. At the end of the day, they're frameworks. And so when you think about this, don't think about SAFe as having to do all this stuff. The way I view SAFe personally is this right here. You know, it's like, look, an enterprise, there's things like, what do you do with investment strategy? Well, Scrum's not going to tell you. The Scrum guy doesn't get into investment strategy and diversifying your portfolio so that you don't get disrupted by another person in the market, right? SAFe tackles that. The way one of the examples, the analogies I use is when I think of Scrum, like the craftsmanship of beautiful Scrum, like Jason Tanner style Scrum, right? This person who's been a CST for a decade, right? I think about this snap-on tool socket wrench set, this beautiful heirloom quality thing that you spent $2,000 that your grandkids will be able to take out of the oiled leather pouch and pull out the red box, and it's this beautiful socket set, right? Whereas SAFe, better analogy for that, you're walking into Lowe's or Home Depot and there's this 10 by 10 monstrosity with 80 drawers that are all pre-filled with tools, right? Everything from tightening your eyeglasses to a sledgehammer. It's all in there. Now, are you going to get that home and you're going to use it all? No. Is it going to be the same quality as focusing on that beautiful Scrum? No. But are there things that might be in there that you can't get from focusing on the team? And so I say this, when you look at this set of competencies, I view SAFe as 7 core competencies in these 21 different dimensions that help you become a more agile enterprise, a more agile government program. And, you know, personal opinion, you can start with any of these. Scaled Agile's preference, start with launching an Agile release training. And, you know, to me, it's the values and the principles. So not everybody looks at it that way. You know, Steve, when you and I went through the implementing class in early 2014, definitely was not phrased that way, right? It was definitely, here's the process, follow the process, 1, 2, 3, launch, right? Well, they've learned and they've grown and they've adapted. And, you know, most of my work in the last year has been almost exclusively on the business side, where, you know, where we're hired basically, hey, Phil, we've hit a ceiling here on our SAFe implementation and we need to get business engaged. It's like, well, we can do that. Now, could a Scrum coach do that? Sure. Could Jason Tanner do that? Absolutely. I'm sure he has. But when you think about SAFe, part of the value of this is the materials, the common lexicon and things like that. But what you have to battle is the fact that, you know, my very first job, when I left AT&T to be a consultant, I flew from Scotland at this leadership retreat to, from Scotland to Dallas. And then the next day I went to Smithfield, Rhode Island, to this financial services firm there. And I almost got fired by day 3, they were ready to fire me because I was talking about SAFe. I just came back from a SAFe leadership retreat, right? 50 people from around the world talking about SAFe for a week. And they said, well, we hate SAFe. It cost us $1 million. Don't ever say that's a 4-letter word here. And ironically, I ended up launching 2 Agile release trains. There's a whole philosophical debate. Did they implement SAFe or not? Because I didn't use any training materials. We didn't call it the same thing, but they had quarterly big room planning. They had a dedicated facilitator, right? I mean, there's a lot of commonalities there. So ask yourself, you know, what is SAFe to you? Is it a framework? Is it a process? Is it the evil beast? Is it the wonderful, you know, magical miracle thing? And so pitfalls, most of these come back to some of the things that we've just talked about. First off, SAFe is the destination. How many companies out there, they're all about SAFe, right? Hey, tell me how things are going. Oh, we've trained 1,047 people and we've launched 17 Agile release trains. Okay, so what does that tell me about delivering more value sooner? What does that tell me about faster time to market? What does that tell me about achieving your customers' outcomes? What does that tell me about profitability? And so pitfall here is, you know, safe's not the destination. Next thing, practices over principles. You know, I told Steve I share this story. So back in early 2014, SAFe 3 had just come out. The implementing SAFe class, where you become an SPC, was 5 days, not 4. Day 5 was actually a proctored exam. It was closed book. You were given a little placemat of the framework picture, but you couldn't use your notes. You couldn't use anything. And they were walking around making sure that you weren't cheating. You didn't know until the following Tuesday if you passed or not. And I got a phone call about 10 o'clock at night on Tuesday. I got my thing saying, congratulations, you're an SPC, about 6 o'clock in the evening. 10 o'clock, my phone rings, and it's somebody sounding really urgent. I went down there, and I had another person with me who also took the class. And she says, what are we going to do? What are we going to tell our VP? And I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, we didn't pass. What do you mean we didn't pass? We didn't pass the implementing SAFe exam. What are we going to do? We're not SPCs. We're supposed to teach next week. I'm like, I passed. You must have gotten my results. Right? This individual just could not fathom that I passed and she did not. And what's interesting here, and the reason I share that story on this particular slide, is that her job, so we were working, at the time I was working at AT&T, and our goal was to create a place inside AT&T. There was nothing like AT&T, to create a startup culture inside AT&T. And we did that as a big data startup, and our culture was amazing. But the problem is we were not doing official Agile. So this other individual that went with me, she was part of the official Agile COE. She was the individual who owned Agile for that part of the company. And she basically would come in and tell us that we're doing this wrong. And so for her, the thought of not being able to direct how Agile was going to be implemented inside this high profile startup part of the company was just completely mind blowing. And, for her, this is for her. I'm not going to mention her name, but, the number of times she told us that we're doing it wrong. We wanted to implement Kanban. You're doing it wrong. Right? It's not official Agile if it's not Scrum. And how many times out there do SPCs, right? I'm a company, I go out, I get my SPC, I come back, and I'm telling you what Agile is. I'm telling you what Scrum is. I'm telling you what SAFe is. And if you don't do it the way that I say you're doing it wrong. So I'm focusing on adherence to the processes and to the practices and ignoring the principles. And so just by nature, somebody who's overbearing and trying to shove SAFe down your throat, or Scrum or Kanban, whatever, isn't Agile. So that's a pitfall that you may encounter in your journey. Another one, which kind of ties into this, and some of these bleed over into each other, Agile in name only, right? So this particular, the COE I'm thinking about at the time in this story, they were the official. So at this corporation, Agile was a community of practice, and it was awesome until we made the mistake of recommending a tool. And the company invested in a big Agile tool, and that got on the radar. And so officially now we have to make this Agile official. So they named a director of Agile, and we couldn't meet as a community anymore. People got sucked in and became part of the Agile Center of Excellence. And they descended like locusts. If they heard the word Scrum, they heard the word Agile, they come in with their clipboards and they would rate you. They would rate you as bronze, silver, or gold based on your adherence to the practices, to their way of doing Scrum, to their way of being Agile. Doing Agile is what they called it. And if you didn't comply, veto, you're done. You cannot be Agile anymore. And so that's why it was so controversial for me, because I actually, true story here, the reason I went to SAFe is because it wasn't official Agile. And it gave me a method between the top cover of us being a startup and it not being Scrum. I was able to completely circumvent that Agile Center of Excellence. So that happens all the time, where you're basically focusing on implementing a process that's in name only. And it's like, are you having daily stand-ups? Are you having daily scrums? Are you having daily syncs, whatever you want to call them, right? Well, is that the right question to ask? And so Agile in name only is a pitfall that will bring your SAFe implementation down. Number 4, the magical SPC certification, right? So there's about 20,000 SPCs out there now, give or take. I don't know the exact numbers in front of me. I know I saw a slide with that at one point. There were, 250 or so when Steve and I went through the class. That's a lot of people. Personally, I believe that SPCs are part of the reason that SAFE gets a bad name. Why? Because SPCs are people, and they're people who are put in situations, sometimes beyond their control, sometimes to put food on the table, sometimes because they got a little bit of ego, right? But I asked myself, if my kid was sick and I had a choice between driving for Uber and going over my skis, telling somebody, faking it till I make it when it comes to launching an agile release train, I'd probably be faking it till I make it. And, that's just the nature of the industry. When you say, what is an SPC? Well, are they an expert in SAFE? Most of them will tell you they are, right? So even if they just took the implementing class 3 weeks ago, failed the exam 3 times, and finally passed with a 75 on the honor system from their own home, they're going to be an expert in SAFE because they're an SPC, right? Is it somebody with deep experience? There are no prerequisites to become an SPC. So getting an SPC does not give you any indication as to whether or not you have any experience. Does it mean that you can lead a transformation? Personal opinion, I think it depends, right? Does it mean you're a great trainer? Does it mean you're a great agile coach, right? So I talk a lot, and I spent about a year and a half. There's this guy, Damon Poole, who tried to beat into me, all this stuff about professional coaching. And I got to tell you, coaching for me is work. It's not natural for me. I'm naturally a mentor. I'm not naturally a coach. Some people are natural coaches, not this guy. Can I have a coaching agreement? Can I do professional coaching fairly well? Yeah, pretty good. Yes, if I have to. But I'd much rather connect with somebody who's great at it, right? My point here is there's lots of things here. And what ends up happening is people assume that SPCs are magical. I'm at this point in my journey now where I've kind of made a name for myself in the LPM space. I've done lots and lots of lean portfolio management work and have helped many companies become successful. And my second LPM implementation was back in late 2017, early 2018. And I remember my employer at the time wanted to move me from this cybersecurity business that was around. This is before SAFE had an LPM class. I mean, this is like, early adopter stuff. And we were tremendously successful. And they wanted to pull me out and put in somebody else. And I'm like, that person has no experience with executives, no experience with lean portfolio management, no experience with SAFE. And the response was, well, they're an SPC. Contractually, we had to provide another SPC. And that just really, that did not sit well with me. And I outside of, I do a lot of talks about the SPC journey, and I'm investing my personal time in really kind of exposing the fact that an SPC is not an SPC is not an SPC. So a little side note here, Phil's opinion, the SPC certification is valuable and useful. It gives you access to a bunch of toolkits and resources that you don't have, but it doesn't make you an expert overnight. And so if you're out there as a consultant, I'm sorry, my mission is to help customers understand that, if they're hiring a consulting company, don't just say, well, you need 6 SPCs. Well, I want to talk about who those people are and what their skills are, their expertise, their attributes and stuff. So last one, the SAFE says trap. So I mentioned that memo earlier, right? And I was out out by LA, in El Segundo by LA Air Force Base, and I had been invited to be the whole consulting coaching situation in the government's messy because the companies that have the expertise are the bigger companies, and the government's never going to hire these bigger companies to be their trusted advisors and coaches because they're these big defense contractors. And so I ended up being the guest at several PI planning events, and I'm out there as a guest at this planning event that this lieutenant colonel was putting on, and there was a group of SPCs preparing a PowerPoint deck to respond to the memo, right? When the czar of software says avoid rigid and prescriptive framework like SAFE, it caused ripple through all of DoD. This is out at Space and Missile Systems Center, the Space Force, Space Command. And the deck, the first 3 slides were basically SAFE da-da-da-da, SAFE da-da-da-da, SAFE da-da-da-da, SAFE da-da-da-da, SAFE says this, SAFE and like, how is that going to convince somebody to actually change their perspective on this? right? And it blows my mind how often people do this. And, for me personally, I don't teach as many classes this day. I'm actually teaching or co-teaching, because I love co-teaching with newer SPCs to help them on their journey. And, this is really important for me to say, in my opinion, in my experience, and what people don't realize is that if they're the expert and they say it and they don't qualify that with "it's my experience," then people think that, well, SAFe says this, or they'll actually pull out that note. Well, no, wait. SAFe says you have to have 10 features going into PI planning, going into this roughly quarterly cadence-based planning. You have to have 10 features. That's not what it means. It doesn't mean let's count how many features you have, and if you have 11, we're going to give you a demerit. It means, bring in 10, don't bring in 100, right? And so really this is adherence to all of this. So that's kind of the pitfall spiel, and we'll talk about what we can do about it. I'm going to flip over to the Miro board and just see, this is an experiment to see if anybody actually took some time to throw some stuff on there. I wasn't sure if it would happen or not. There's a couple things on there. All right. So easy pivot from waterfall PM world. It always starts the tough discussions about what is not working so well. Yeah. Easy pivot from the waterfall PM world. Requires leadership engagement to be successful. That's actually, who wrote that? I want to thank you. Who said that? That requires leadership engagement to be successful. Whoever you are, that's awesome. That's bold to say that, and it's true. So, can you have great Scrum without leadership engagement? Arguably, you could. Can you have business agility across your enterprise or your government agency without leaders who are truly engaged, not just supportive? Personally, I don't believe you can. Optimizes for feature teams over empowered product solving. Is it product solving teams? What's a product solving team, or is that a typo? Problem solving teams. Yeah, it's interesting. There's a book called Team Topologies by Manuel Payas, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the other author. And yeah, early SAFe, you need feature teams, right? Feature teams. Well, guess what? You know how many arts I've actually seen out there in the real world, of the dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, I've seen that have 100% feature teams? One, right? You know, my recommendation is, if you've got one software product that you've got 500 people building, and the rest of your company has a beautiful culture, my recommendation is, well, that's kind of a use case. We're all in the same code, we're all in the same pipeline, and it's all working together, and we have no cultural issues. Everything's beautiful. That's a case for large enterprise scale Scrum or Nexus, right? I mean, it's you don't need all this other stuff if you just got purely software. Now, what I will tell you is that feature teams, I don't see a lot of them existing. And that's why I really like the newer stuff with Team Topologies, because it brings in a different perspective on that. So definitely some minuses. What have we done about this? Another one on here. Easy to attach measurements versus behaviors. Interesting. So I have a question for you. If you look at this, is it easy to pivot from waterfall to Scrum? Before SAFe, what did people do? What happened in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? People pivoted from waterfall to Scrum, right? The same things that prevented that from working, the same thing that prevents SAFe from working. And I've implemented Scrum at scale. I haven't implemented less. I've implemented Nexus, Scrum at scale. God help us, Spotify-ish, right? My personal take on Spotify-ish is basically, company needs to reduce cost, reduce labor force. So they basically implement Spotify and do musical chairs, not enough chairs for everybody. Everybody has to apply for a new job. Oh, wait, there's not enough jobs for everybody. And then you can say, well, hey, moving to Spotify saved us all this money. That's my personal take, or my experience with the Spotify-ish model. There's lots of stuff here. So let's talk about some second chances, and then I'll pull back into this. As we're going through the second chances, if you've got thoughts on other ways you might have solved some of these, feel free to throw it in here. I'm looking at the amount of feedback on here, and I'm saying, hey, you know what? maybe don't worry about the Miro board. We can just have a conversation. So I'll make sure we have some time for that. All right. So second chances, repair, refresh, recover, reboot, restart, whatever you want to call it. And it's funny. I don't know if Mike's still on here. Mike, are you still out there? He may have dropped. He's playing Diablo more.
No.
Oh, there he is. He's heard me say these things, but we've been working together I met him. He was a customer of mine several years ago when I was green and new to the government. My first safe implementation in the government was with Mike. He was the client, and his first. If you could not create a better example of all the best that Scaled Agile has to offer when it comes to a team of teams construct, than what Mike and his government program they accomplished. It wasn't me; it was them. And he's now in a consulting world, and he's seeing the reality of what happens out there, where people are doing their best. But it's Mike. Anything you want to throw out there before I get into this?
It's messy. It's I was spoiled because we were able to take a lot of safe guidance and directly apply it because everyone on the art had the right mindset. But that's a rarity I've come to understand, and it can get messy.
It's messy quickly. All right, so a couple things here. So first off, safe's the vehicle, not the destination, right? So second time around, remember that. In fact, it's become last couple of years, I'm a big fan of leading indicators. And I've been sharing this thing about, getting to Disneyland versus World. Don't get me started on that one. But think about this. It's time for a family vacation. And you've been looking forward to it all year. And your kids want to go to Disney World. You're driving from Dallas to Orlando. And the day of the event comes. It's time to leave. You've mapped out. You've got Waze ready to go. You got snacks in the car. And they're like, oh, come on, Dad. Come on, Dad. All right, so you finally get in the car. Everybody's sitting in the car. You open the garage. You get ready to pull out. You say, wait, 2017 Ford Escape. 2017 Ford Escape. Check it out. Lighted vanity mirrors. Pretty cool. Wait, check out the sound system. Dad, can we go? Wait. Notice you're sitting on leather seats. How cool is that? Wait, can we go? Then I'm getting the elbow from the wife, and it's like, no, wait. There's a glove box that closes. Check out the cool click it makes when I close it. Dual air conditioning controls, because your mom always runs, she always gets cold. I'm always getting warm, so I can turn this down. How cool is that, right? How do you think my family's feeling right now if I did that for real? 2017 Ford Escape, right? Well, I know the vehicle will get me there. I trust it. I've maintained it. I know that lots of people out there are driving Fords. And aside from the joke you can make about the acronym, right, which I haven't experienced myself, it's reliable. I'm not thinking about the vehicle at all. I'm thinking about getting to Disney World. And think about that when it comes to implementing SAFE or any other methodology, to be blunt, right? It's the vehicle, not the destination. The point where when I work with senior executives, I don't talk about SAFE. No one cares. They know that I'm an SPCT. They know that their company has chosen to implement Scaled Agile framework, but we don't talk about it. We're talking about the outcomes they want to achieve. We're talking about their strategy. We're talking about their transformation. We're talking about whatever outcomes it is they want to achieve. And that's probably the biggest piece of advice I can give you when it comes to second chance SAFE is it's the vehicle, not the destination. It's kind of like, right? Can you get people riled up about iOS versus Android? Sure. But who's going to argue with you about the usefulness of a phone? And that's kind of the theme I use all the time. And granted, I probably use it more because I'm working more with the LPM side of things, but where people really don't care what framework you're using. Second thing on there, choose your navigators carefully. What you're looking at here is the latest rev of my little personal self-assessment I use when I mentor other change agents. I've been trying to get it to be more SAFE specific. I mentioned earlier on the when we were talking before the presentation that I've intentionally not looked at the Agile Coaching Growth Wheel that the Scrum Alliance has put together because I don't want to bias myself. But essentially, if you think about this, right, that idea of this magical SPC, well, getting your certification, does that mean that you have incredible skills as a coach, as a mentor, as a facilitator? I mean, for me personally, facilitation was hard. Not getting a vote, oh my gosh. The biggest, most painful facilitation for me was facilitating a kickoff and a brainstorming session, a planning session for a large company's 30 coach lead agile center of excellence, and hearing them say things like, we need 3 product owners for each team we have, and not being able to have a vote because my hat was facilitator, not mentor, not coach, not consultant at the time. Do you have that discipline, right? Are you able to do the consulting side of it? Because sometimes they don't want to coach. Sometimes they're paying for somebody to come in and give their expert opinion. And so knowing when to switch between those, do you have skills and mastery in all of those? What about your attributes, right? Are you naturally somebody who leads with transparency, with authenticity? Do you build trust? Are you self-aware? You have self-discipline, right? You have empathy. And all those are things you have to think about. Then you look at kind of expertise versus experience, right? So yes, great. You've got your SPC. Yes, you've taken every safe class out there. Yes, you've got IC Agile certified, you're an IC Agile certified team facilitator. You're an IC Agile certified Agile coach, right? That means you've got the expertise, the certifications to back it up. You've got 47 acronyms in your LinkedIn last name, right? You're the expert. Now let's talk about your experience. Have you applied that? So you got your LPM certification, okay? And you even taught that class. Have you actually helped a company establish a lean portfolio? Because I'll tell you this, it's nothing like in the book. I mean, it is a multi-year journey. And, I had a coach I mentored, and he joined Applied Frameworks for a brief period of time, specifically because he wanted to get some LPM experience. And one of the things he said was, Phil, you're not talking about LPM at all. It's all about supporting them. It's like the one thing they've done is they're using cost relay and they have a Kanban board now, but you aren't pushing all the other stuff. Why not? I'm like, because this solves their problem. I mean, that I view that as a big win, because this senior executive vice president stands up in the middle of annual planning and he's like, wait a second, what if we stop trying to have the solution all up front and stop looking at these as we want to do X and Y and Z, and instead look at them as opportunities? That's a mic drop moment for me, right? You're moving, now you've opened the door to lean startup and to the ability to pivot, right? And that mindset shift is worth so much more than adhering to specific practices. So, and the last thing on here is domains, right? Being able to effect change and help implement SAFe or Scrum inside the federal government, whether it be Fed Civ or DoD or security, whatever, is different than doing it at a Fortune 10, which is different than doing it at a startup, right? The marketing, doing it with helping marketing, helping finance, helping technology, those are all things that are different. As an SPCT, I should be able to teach all the classes. Well, guess what? I am never going to teach the Agile Software Engineering course by myself. I might teach with Ken Pugh, who is an expert and helped write that class. And I'll do day 1 and he can do days 2 and 3, because I can't code my way at all out of anything. And I can say that and still be a successful consultant, coach, mentor, right? And so really kind of choose your navigators carefully. Can they talk about these things? Or can they say that they don't know? Or do they feel like they need to be the experts? A couple of things here when we look at second chances. Keep in mind, this is a framework. It's flexible, right? A roadmap is not a committed plan, right? You're going to have to reroute. It's not all the same. You have to accept reality. I'm a big fan. So I really, really, really do not like, I worked for a company that was all about, let's go in and you pay us $250,000 and we'll come in and we'll assess you. And at the end of the day, we'll give you a report that says, here's what's wrong with you. I never had to do that. I never got stuck with that. I was able to dodge that every time because I philosophically disagree that that's valuable without the self-assessment portion. Now, if we have a bunch of people assess themselves and then they try and convince me to share my perspective, sure, but the power is in the shared perspectives. And so know where you are, understand reality, not based on what one person thinks, what one consultant thinks, what one SPC thinks, but based on what everybody's saying. Let's do that self-assessment together. Then create a convoy. And I remember this movie when I was a kid and I liked it. So I put it in here. But anyway, find your community. That's the number one thing I'll say. This meetup right now, right? Being on here, the reason I'm choosing to do this after, teaching all day is because this is what people do for me, right? And it's so awesome that people can go look at this, and maybe if even only one person gets inspired to do one thing differently, it's worth it. And the community is where you're going to learn the things. There's a guy I've mentored for retired soldier, and it's cool to watch people kind of come into their own. And he has a motto. He says, some things are caught and some things are taught, right? Well, the community can share all the things they've caught with, right? I mean, I tell you, the number of times I've tried to save people I've mentored from making the same mistakes as me, it's sad. Mike here knows he sees me beat myself up because I wanted to save them from themselves. There's some things they've learned for themselves. There's also things you need to hear from different people, different times, right? One of the things I love doing is connecting somebody that, I did a talk at the Safe Summit a couple weeks ago, and, it's like at the same time, it's like, oh, I want to learn more. Well, great, learn from me, but let me introduce you to this person, introduce you to that person. They're going to give you different perspectives and communities where all that happens. So find that community and bring others along the way. Finally, you want to run the engine forever. So whatever you do, you want to make sure that it sets people up for this infinite loop of sustainability and profitability in the private sector. Now, profitability is not there in the government sector, but really serving the citizens, serving the warfighters is that profitability equivalent. But lean agile can impact your bottom line, right? So understanding the impact of those metrics, understanding, if you're actually getting there, measuring things, making data-driven decisions, building in this culture of plan, do, check, adjust at the portfolio level, the startup cycle, build, measure, learn, right? Moving from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. All of those things don't just pop up overnight. So when you go to implement, you take your second chance at this journey, you must plant those seeds either before you start or as you go, because they're the things that are going to keep you going. I tell a story in one of my LPM classes about a tremendously successful, chief marketing officer of a Fortune 10 is saying, okay, you've got my attention. You delivered more value as of today than you did the entire previous calendar year. And that was in May. I mean, it was a massive success. I think it was the 2018 Safe Summit. You can go look at the customer did their talk there, and it was unprecedented leadership engagement, and it turned their entire transformation around, and it kept them going. They're still going. They're doing awesome, but it was because of that acknowledgement that something was different, and it wasn't. What ended up happening is everybody came out of the woodwork and wanted to implement LPM. What they didn't do was actually take the time to understand why that one business unit had such amazing success. And it wasn't because of SAFE. It wasn't because of the LPM model that we implemented. It was because you had executives who became lean agile leaders. They changed their mindset. They started valuing different things, working software over comprehensive documentation. Imagine what would happen for these average agile release trains out there. I tell this story sometimes when I'm teaching, and people look at me like I'm just like, oh my God, what a nightmare. I say, this senior vice president shows up at a system demo for the Agile release train and says, am I seeing this on a production equivalent staging environment, or is that in dev? This is a business executive asking this. And the IT people just go white because it's on dev, right? And imagine that stuff starting to happen. So that's kind of some of the pitfalls and some of the things I have to share. Looking at the board, good there. And I guess for me, let's just turn off the screen share, and in the remaining time I have, just what questions do you have? Lots of words in a short period of time. So hopefully that was useful. Give me a thumbs up if it was, are you stunned into silence because it was so horrible, or are you feeling like, okay, is that how you view SAFE? Is that how you've been introduced to the framework, or do you have other perceptions on it?
I think there's a lot of commonality there with how it's been introduced in organizations. And I think, Phil, tied to that, I'm curious on your perspective. You talk about Agile in name only. I think that's huge. That's always a business, kind of corporations first go in. It's Agile in name only. I see a lot of things like job mapping, like let's make the PM Scrum Masters. And I mean, you know, you've seen it everywhere, right? So I think there's really a significant amount of enterprises just start doing those mappings off the bat with no appreciation of principle or what Agile is trying to solve.
You know, it's funny. There's a it's you know, like I said, I come across a little bit defensive as safe, but the reality is, what I do, you know, the day I became an SPCT, what I was excited about is the fact that I wasn't going to get kicked out of the community. So in order to be part of the SPCT community, where people who are doing lean agile at scale around the globe, you have to be an SPCT to stay there. So I had to get my SPCT to be part of that community that I've come to learn, and you know, I love it. I work with people who are thought leaders in the space, and I get to share my field experiences, and they share their thought leadership, and it's cool, fun stuff. And when you look at this is not unique to SAFe, but you know what you just talked about. A lot of the reasons that, and this is, I guess, part of this is me turning SAFe into, you know, I'm using SAFe the way that to solve the problems that I've had. Like, you know, that big transformation, it failed because, quite frankly, the PMO hated transparency. They wanted to control all the messaging to the rest of the enterprise, and they wanted it to all be positive, and it wasn't, right? You know, UX, hey, we want to have UX. I'm a huge fan of UX. To me personally, you know, when you see the architect in SAFe, to me, there can be a couple of them. You can have the UX architect and you can have the technology architect. They're both architects. Enterprise architect, this person's caring for the user experience. This person's caring for the technology. And we had a blueprint team, 67 Scrum teams and 1 blueprint team. Well, guess what? All design had to go through the blueprint team. So you talk about lean and flow, that totally did not work. But where I was going with this is that, you know, one of the things I do like about the framework is that there's all these different toolkits that you get access to. And what's funny is that we don't cover all of these in the class. People have to go out and explore this. But there's actually there's a deck that specifically talks about don't map your roles, move to roles. Let me share again real quick. And I'm asking for forgiveness, not permission here, because this is technically not something I should be sharing, but maybe I shouldn't share. You know what, I'm going to ask for, I'll ask for forgiveness here. This is contextually relevant. Just a side note here, that my point I'm trying to make here is that it talks about, if you're going to be looking at where you find Scrum Masters and stuff, first off, start with the mindset, right? Look at this, coordinating to coaching, setting deadlines to setting objectives, from knowing the answer to asking the team for the answer. That's good stuff here, right? And it talks about some of the roles, but then look at this. Check this out. These are the attributes of a great Scrum Master according to SAFe, right? So, you know, there's a lot in here that people don't understand, because at the end of the day, a lot of Agilists volunteer for this, work with SAFe. And so I totally agree with you. I would never advocate for mapping roles. And I know Mike's worked with me on some engagements, and I get itchy about that, you know, and it's sad, but is that, you know, it's easy to do. And for me, my mission, LPM and helping SPCs, because, you know, that's kind of what I found. This person's responsible for leading us into the future from a way of working perspective. And these people are the ones who are setting the tone and demonstrating the behaviors for the enterprise. You get them to become lean and agile, get them to be a little more humble. You got a recipe for success, regardless of the framework you use. What other thoughts you have?
So Phil, something that you said that really resonates with me that I think kind of goes along with this topic is this concept of like what an SPC is and what it means to people, right? So as a leader of servant leaders, you know, in my current space, I've processed through like over 300 resumes in the last 2 years, right? And the resume process is that the talent acquisition looks for those letters on the resume. They're like, this person has an SPC and they're this and they're this and they're this and they're, you know, and then they get to the interview with me and they can't lead a team out of a paper bag. Like you can tell by the way they talk about things. They have all this book knowledge, right? All this, like, I can definitely take this test and answer this questions. And you can tell that they've sort of run through all the circuits of the classes, but like you ask them a situational question, what do you do with this circumstance? And it's just, it just falls flat, right? But if you don't have like a really good agilist sorting through the pile to begin with, they may be taking out people who are project
Absolutely.
managers that have an amazing skill set, right? If you talk to them, those project managers who don't have an agile title or an SPC, when you talk to them, they may be amazing for a team, right? So like that part of your presentation really resonated with me, and also what Steve had said about sort of aligning the roles. I've certainly been in organizations where they've converted project managers instantly into scrum masters, and then those scrum masters report up to like technical people. So they have no concept of like how to even like, let's say you put somebody in there, what a disservice you're doing to them by not supporting them with any kind of agile development paths, right? They just execute, hit the deadlines, hit the capacity numbers, hit your metrics, and they're really missing out on the fact to grow, the opportunity to grow as a coach. So a lot of what you said today really resonated
And
with
it's,
me.
yeah, and this is, like I said, this to me, this is the opportunity here, right? So interesting. If you look at this, this is actually, this is a self-assessment from an SPCT, one of the 108 people across the globe that have been vetted and are experts in SAFe. And just what you see here, look at this. So their experience, right? This being a 0, it's novice, advanced beginner, proficient, and expert, right? Well, this is an SPCT, one of the top people in the world. Notice that beginner for establishing lean portfolios, right? Accelerating business agility, working with senior execs on the business side. Also coaching agile teams, right? It's now, granted, this person's worked with me for, paired with me and met me in the community long enough to know that I would probably raise my eyebrows if he put a 5 on anything. But, the domains here, the skills, the experience, the expertise, the leadership skills. And if you look, just scrolling out here, there's differences across this. And these are individuals on different points of their journey. And you can find some commonalities. Like, for example, you can see here that, hey, LPM is a gap for most people, whether it be the SPC or SPCTs. And what you're looking at, by the way, is I'm working on a SPC self-assessment that may or may not end up becoming a thing. And this was the first beta of it. And you can just kind of see, imagine if you're leading the center of excellence or a LACE or, the coaching company, the coaching organization, transformation office for a company. Well, understanding this, imagine if you're hiring somebody to be an internal change agent, right? Well, do the domains they've worked with, say you're a company that basically does mostly software engineering and hardware and DevSecOps and architecture. Well, this person's been an SPC since before I have. They got theirs in 2013. You hire this person to be your agile coach, to be your SPC. Look at this. Almost no architecture, almost no hardware, almost no software, almost no DevOps, right? But they've been an SPC for 8 years. And so I'm hoping that eventually, that we can get some buy-in here, because I'd love to be able to have this type of thing as part of the conversations around, okay, we need an SPC to come help us. Let's talk about your experiences, or we're hiring a consulting company. Are we writing our contracts that say we need to, we're going to give you 6 SPCs? Well, that doesn't sell us anything. Instead, write a contract that says we need X number of years of experience. We need X number of validated experience in these domains, right? And it just has to switch that way. But you made my day there, Chris, and that one more person has heard the message and agrees. And quite frankly, this it's a bigger problem in SAFe because SAFe's got a big part of the market share. And people who are failed at Agile, they're trying SAFe and they're having the same problems. And so, changing the dialogue, changing the questions, changing the market. What else? I don't know how we are on our time box, Steve. I'm cool to keep going if there's more questions.
Yeah, we can do another question or two if the audience has anything. Sure. Anyone else? Questions for Phil?
And it doesn't have to even be on this. I mean, you've got somebody here who's got deep experience with SAFe, and if you want to bash your horror stories of SAFe off me, I'm good with that. If you want to, debunk myths, I mean, the reality is that people lead the change. People are different. So.
So I have a question. I'm just trying to think through it right now. So I guess just given who's on the call, so I come from a different background than a lot of different Scrum Masters. I have worked in many different places, medium-sized company before I got to where I am, come with an HR background. So I think I've always understood people first before I kind of went to school and got a degree in MIS and kind of learned from my mentor, kind of Agile as a whole, right? So I think of it as a framework, not as some rigid thing we're supposed to follow. Every space you go to is going to require something to be different. It needs to make sense in the world that you're trying to apply it in. So a challenge that I'm up against now is I look at it as a whole always. And I'm at the point now where I'm telling leadership, if you don't back the things, if you don't back this whole thing, Agile, you all the way down, while I can make improvements with my teams, it's not going to mean anything if you're not reiterating that, and so my problem being is a lead of the engineers. I'm struggling to coach with him because he's very defensive. He's like, my team. And I'm like, actually, they're not your team. They're already on a team. You're their manager. You need their guidance. I'm here to help them reach that potential with your help, right? And it's really important that you and I have a good relationship and that we can communicate. And that's not happening. So I'm just, I guess, any guidance about maybe how to.
That's a tough one. It's when there's this, I believe there's these spectrum of personalities, right? When it comes to consulting or coaching, whatever you want to call it, as an outside person. Now, one end of the spectrum, you got this guy I'm thinking about. I know might hopefully drop because he knows what I'm talking about, but it's basically my job is to convince you that I'm an expert and you're going to fail without me. So you are smart for hiring me because I'm the expert. Let me rattle off all my customers to you and how I brought the rain, brought the magic. Hire me and do what I tell you to do and you'll be successful. The other end of the spectrum, you've got the person who says, you're going to do some amazing stuff. And I'd be honored and humbled to join you on your journey. What are you going to do? I'm going to be honored and humbled to join you on your journey. What do you want to do? Right? And reality, there's customers that want this. There's customers that want this. And what I've learned is, I can't help everybody. And I'm at a point in my journey where I had enough demand that I can walk away. And I didn't have that 5 years ago. But there are people that I know I can't help because I'm not the right person for them. And so that's part of the reality out there is that, and it's funny that this guy over here I just talked about actually had a government customer who I'm like, okay, you've chosen that person, that company's your contractor. We work very differently. They're like, yeah, he's a steamroller. We're going to let him go do his steamrolling and we want you there to pick up the pieces, Phil, because we need to be able to last, but I want a big bang and I'm going to use him to be the steamroller. And I want to use you to pick up the pieces. And I'm like, that doesn't really feel right to me. I'll stick around for a couple of months, but I think I'm going to find something else. My point on that, Kristen, is that if he's defensive with you already, if you can't talk through that, and I tell you, acknowledge this, if you are internal, you have a whole different set of challenges than if you're external. Sadly, one of the biggest value I bring is I'm now a known person. I'm still weird about that, but in the LPM space. And part of the value I bring is basically coming in and saying the same thing that the person they've already hired for a fraction of my cost has been saying to them for months. And sometimes people need to hear it differently. There was actually a Fortune 10 company, and my client was the leader of the COE, the VP and the director of the COE. They brought their CIO to Scaled Agile DFW meetup so that I could say things that would have gotten me fired if I tried to say them inside the company. And I bring this up in that, you know, being able to share that, being able to have that perspective. Now, the other thing I'll say is that why are you, there's a, it's hard to push up. You know, people call it the frozen middle, the magic middle, things like that. And if you're in your chain of command, it's really tough. What I found is I focus on creating pull. So is there somebody outside of the chain of command that might get bit by the Agile bullet, that gets intrigued by this, hears some of your stories and goes, wow, you know, like Chris, well, that sounds really interesting. I want to hear more. Well, now your person who doesn't want to hear from you is sitting at the table listening to you say it to his boss or to his boss's boss because they're interested in it. I call that creating pull. You know, find a way to create that pull. And I've seen something, a company out of North Carolina did something really interesting. They basically did an internal AMA kind of thing. They brought myself, they asked for some volunteers, myself, and there's some other people. We basically demystified lean portfolio management for them. And it was something where the internal leader wanted to implement LPM, but they also didn't want to implement it with, you know, basically reskinning the same stuff and calling it something different, which is a big problem with the LPM space. But anyway, they brought us in and we basically had a 1 hour kind of panel type thing where this person that was their blocker could hear from 4 different people the same messaging. You may have to get creative that way. I don't know if that helps or not. Or does anybody else here have a way to solve that problem? I as Agilists, we all have encountered that. I see Mr. Robertson has come off mute.
Kristen, sometimes it takes, you have to be the first one to extend the vulnerability, right? If the person you are trying to create trust with just, you know, is not going to meet you, you know, to me, you have 2 options: either give up on it or be very vulnerable and forthright with them and hope that they respond to that. You know, I don't know your situation, so I wouldn't recommend which direction you would want to go in, but it's hard to be vulnerable in front of people like that, but maybe that's what it takes to break the ice with them.
Yeah, I am typically pretty direct and pretty honest. And I think you mentioned something, Bill, earlier talking about transparency. I think that plays a little bit into here. Some people can be newer in roles and they just kind of want to be able to have some kind of control. So it's very hard for someone like me when I'm looking at leadership right above me and even maybe a level above, when I'm like, I don't know what secrets you're holding, but all of this is going to come down here. And we just want to see the path. I'm not like, you don't have to divulge secrets, but it's just work, you know, it's just work coming down. And it just sometimes can make it a little bit difficult. And I think for me, just somebody who directly looks at it and goes, there's a problem right there with our work intake and our whole area, and we need to fix it. And nobody wants to acknowledge it. And then I just see the impact it has on the team.
So that, welcome to being an Agilist or and being a coach, right? I mean, you see what they don't see. I mean, I think about, you know, if I walked into a client and told them everything that I see, bluntly, unfiltered, they would not only would they get rid of me, but they would basically say, forget Agile, right? You know, I have to have permission, right? So you have to build that trust. You know, like I said, I'm far enough in my career that I sometimes get to pass because they already trust me because they've talked to another customer or they've seen me talk or they've done their homework, right? But if I was internal, it's a lot more difficult. So asking for consent, right? So sometimes it's as simple as saying, hey, you know, I'm seeing some things that you may not be seeing. Would you be open to me sharing my perspective? And it's probably different than yours, and it may even be uncomfortable. I'll tell you, I'm kind of uncomfortable even having this conversation because I'm afraid of how you might react. But talk about yourself, and you know, like as Mike was saying, you're making yourself vulnerable. And I found, I'll just tell you, transparently, I got baggage in my life that makes the word should really be a 4-letter word to me. In fact, I say don't should on people, right? All this to say that, you know, it doesn't feel good for someone to come in and tell you what you're not doing right. And it's funny because, you know, in the LPM space, one of the things people don't realize is that, if I'm going to work with the Salesforce or one of these big, massive corporations and AT&T, guess what? They know how to run a portfolio. They're a Fortune 100 company. They know how to run a portfolio. Does that mean that they can't do better? Sure, they can do better. But I don't go in there and say, gosh, you're not using lean portfolio management, so you're going to fail. No, I say basically, hey, what's working well? What's not working well? What are some things you want to do? Let's see if there's a way to connect there. So maybe with that individual, what do they see that you also see? Because if you both see it, then maybe that's an area of common ground. And I don't know if it works this way as much, because quite frankly, I skipped the team coaching thing. I mean, I've done some team coaching, but I wouldn't call myself a good team coach, because quite frankly, the minute they bring up something that they can't fix, I'm off scaling. But is there something that you could do that you could help them solve a problem with lean agile practices, values, principles? And now you've got something to reflect on. Hey, do you notice how we did this and how this worked? I'd like to do more of that. Can we try something else? That's what I found works best. Now, that's just me, but that approach, it's like people are doing their best, and it's solve a problem. And as you scale, I mean, you want to get in with the CIO, show them, have them have some data that shows that they're running more efficient. They've saved money. They've delivered faster time to market. Give them that data. Now you get to help them some more, right? Going in and tell them how wonderful things are going to be and be agile. They're like, yeah, whatever. Right. So I'll pause there.
Yeah. No, it's some good stuff to think about. I am trying with one team to do something that I was hoping that could be implemented, and the product owner is much more open, and so I'm kind of hoping to use this new project coming to the team as like, see if we did it this way. This is maybe how much smoother, a little bit smoother that it could go.
So here's a thought for you, Tracy. What if somebody else told them? So, I've got a track record of helping companies kind of keep going, right? That's kind of when I look at what my brand is, what I hope it would be. I don't know if it really is, because I don't do research, but that, hey, if Phil helps you, it's going to stick, right? I'm going to become a phone a friend, and I get to hear about your wonderful stuff later on. Part of that is I don't tell people how great stuff is. They tell each other. So we get a portfolio stood up inside a company. The executives that are working this new way, they're the ones talking to finance. They're the ones talking to their peers. They're the ones who are creating buzz around this. So is there somebody that you've helped from a lean agile perspective, that a team that's doing better, and there's a development manager, there's a business person who's going, wow, that's awesome stuff. Can you get that person connected with your boss, with your person you're trying to convince? Because they're going to hear it differently. And sometimes it takes just somebody else saying it.
Yeah, that's some good advice.
This has been fun. I really appreciate you letting me come out here and yap, and for trying out the Miro experiment that I probably won't repeat, at least with the number of people I've got here. I try really hard to not just be a talking head. And I'll leave you with this. Mike over there, I learned this, I think I found this out late last year, but Mike really thought of me when he met me. And it was really uncomfortable. Now he works with me. But so is where I want to go with this is that be aware that people may not see you the way you see yourself when you first meet them. Mike, you want to tell them what you thought of me?
Maybe the safe for work version. My experience with Phil was in a training class initially. He was helping us launch an art, and I, for the first time, had heard some things that were really core and important to me as a person, being tied in with how we operate as an organization, and it just seemed like nirvana, right? It was like, wow, this is so awesome. These lean agile principles and values all coming together, and people actually applying these in some sort of sincerity. And Phil was projecting that. And I have a lot of scars in my personal experiences, and it took me a while to really understand that it wasn't BS, that Phil was being genuine, and we became great friends. But I know the scars that people carry around from bad experiences, and you know, it's hard to get past those sometimes, but yeah.
And how many times has an IT director, an IT manager had to do something to convince the business that's going to be different this time? Right. And how many times have they gotten burned by that? Right. When you're trying to connect to the business and you tell them, hey, we're implementing this, it's going to be different this time. You know, do they believe you? And so there is that reality there. You know, there's a lot of, you can't take the people out of this, and and as Mike said, the scars they have. You know, that company that I worked with out of you know, Smithfield, Rhode Island. I mean, it had a really bad experience with SAFe, and if my perspective was the same as theirs, heck, I'd hate SAFe too. But it ultimately was one consulting company overpromising, under-delivering, and totally implementing SAFe as some sort of weird thing that I would never imagine. But they could have done the same thing with Less or Nexus or whatever, and it would have the same effect. And so meet people where they are, understand their perspectives. And you know, I'm a huge, you know, I'm looking at the chat here. It's right, you know, candid, yeah, transparency, right? And granted, I enjoy a level of transparency that I didn't enjoy 5 years ago, because you know, my options are a little bit larger now. Hopefully my ego's not. But anyway, I appreciate the feedback. I definitely love talking about LPM. Be happy to come back and chat about that. Would ask the board to help me figure out a way to make it more interactive, because I think that would be kind of cool. You know, it's hard to apply some of this stuff without context, and with a wide audience that has a variety of backgrounds. But, thank you.
Yeah. So Phil, thanks again for the presentation. Really enjoyed
that made my day right there. What Dave's evil twin just said. To be honest, I was dreading another SAFe talk, right? You know, and I really appreciate that, because it's what you make of it, right? And
yeah. We've all been burned here in Hartford. All our companies try to implement it multiple times. So we've got a lot of things.
It's big business, Steve. And it's funny because so I think Chris was talking about resumes. One of the things I did, I went back to AT&T as a consultant years later, and didn't plan on it. But my employer at the time, after I said no 4 times, they basically said, if you want to keep working here, you're going to go back to AT&T. And it was a wonderful experience being able to kind of help them turn things around. But part of that was, you know, Candace, our customer, she interviewed 400 SPCs, and what she looked for in an SPC when she started her journey and what she looked for an SPC after I left were completely different. And I got to tell you, the consulting companies did not like her, and they were very happy when she left and somebody else who didn't care as much took over, because, you know, finding quality people out there that have implemented SAFe, that have the battle scars and the self-awareness to be able to be that lean agile leader, it's hard. And I worked at a big body shop, you know, what do they call it? Agile is the door to staffing was the motto, right? Or the unofficial motto. And the recruiting engine there, it's like, I still occasionally get, you know, hey, we've got this contract for an SPC. I'm like, obviously don't know what an SPCT is, because I probably wouldn't be, you know, doing this $70 an hour, you know, coaching an agile team kind of thing. But my point is that there's so much out there, and anything that we can do to demystify this, and it's about people and their ability to say, I don't know. Now, going back to what I said when I first opened is, my kid's sick, I need to put food on the table. Am I going to say I don't know? I haven't, blessedly, I've had that situation, but I'm not going to judge anybody for taking a job that they may not be qualified for. What I will judge is the consulting companies that will put somebody in there like, hey, you know, Phil's your LPM guy, but we've got another person here, and oh, he's not even an SPC, but the contract says as long as he gets an SPC within 60 days, then he counts as an enterprise coach and we can replace Phil with him. Right. So that theoretical situation might have happened out there. That kind of stuff happens. And if the customers don't allow it, then it won't happen anymore.
Agreed. Okay. Why don't we wrap? It's almost 8 o'clock. So we appreciate everyone sticking with us. Great presentation, Phil. Great questions from the group. And yeah, thanks again, Phil. Really appreciate it.
Kristen, thank you for being vulnerable there and and asking, putting yourself out there. I really appreciate it.
Awesome stuff.
Thanks, Phil. Have a good night.
All right, everyone. Have a good night. We'll see you in a couple of weeks, if not next month.
Diane, tell us Scott I said hi.